Hi, everybody. This is Sarita Chung. We're just going to give one more minute, but on our screen right now is a call for highlights. So while we're waiting, if you wanted to scan the QR code, we wanted in the next few sessions highlight your successes, your challenges in different arenas, and we'd love to hear from you and how you're doing in your planning. So if you could please go ahead and use the QR code. It's a super quick survey, and just so that we can understand what your challenges are and what your successes have been. So, and once again, thank you for joining us. This is the DRC Reunification domain. Realizing that this has been a very hard week, and we have reached out to our colleagues in Minnesota. In fact, one of our planning committee, Dr. Nita Gupta, was one of the hospitals affected, and so really our heart and support goes out to all of them that were there. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn this over to Laura for introductions.
Welcome, everyone. Happy September. And you know you're in the DRC Pediatric Patient Tracking and Family Reunification Focus Area session. The Pediatric Pandemic Network is supported in part by the Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, as part of several cooperative agreements. The content presented here is that of the authors and does not necessarily represent the official views of, nor an endorsement by HRSA, HHS, or the U.S. government. Next slide, please. This tells you that there are no relevant financial relationships or commercial support from any of the speakers. You will get information later on about how to claim CE if you're interested in, and I would encourage you to introduce yourself with your name and the hospital from your team in the chat if you would like to.
Great. I'll just take over from here. Once again, I'm Sarita Chung. I'm one of the co-leads of the Family Reunification domain. We have an amazing team. Anna Lynn is part of our team, Brittany Blazer, Christy Deutschman, and Regina Yeski, and as I said, Nita Gupta are also part of our team. The objectives for this session is to identify how quality improvement can be used in family reunification planning. Using quality improvement language, how do we engage stakeholders in reunification planning? Talk about the challenges and solutions to pediatric patient identification and tracking, and assess challenges and gaps in family reunification planning. Next slide. So this is just basically the agenda that we have so far. We are going to talk about highlights and pre-session materials next, and we have two amazing speakers who are going to talk about their work in QI methodology and family reunification, as well as pediatric patient identification and tracking. Next slide. So for those who are early birds, they've already seen this, but for those who arrived, if you could scan the QR code for our next following sessions, we actually would like to have hospitals come and talk. It doesn't have to be a presentation, but really just talking about your challenges, your successes, what has really worked during this collaborative, what has really worked for your hospital. And so we really want to highlight that or just share that among our group, as I think what we've learned is that we really like to learn from each other. Doneen will also put in the chat our Padlet that we have created for this session, and this has all the information that and this is thanks to Anna, that we will be able to, share as far as the work that is being highlighted during this session. I do also want to call out next session in October. I can't believe it's already will be October, but our next session, we actually invited the Pediatric Pandemic Network legal domain to talk about the legal ramifications. And so we would like to extend the invitation not only to you, but your hospital's legal group or whoever you feel like is risk management, who you feel like would like to have questions answered about the legal ramifications of reunification. And so that will be in October. Next slide. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Michelle Pintier. Michelle, I have known for a while, and actually, she was formerly, as a fellow, she was a EMSC disaster fellow, so Emergency Medical Services for Children disaster fellow, where she worked on hazard vulnerability. Uh, uh, when she was also a fellow, she's very productive. She worked on a QI methodology for developing a family unification plan. Currently, Michelle is a pediatric emergency medicine attending at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore in New York and really has worked closely in the disaster fields over the past few years. So I'm really honored to introduce her and Michelle, take over for me. Oh, Michelle, if you're talking, I think you're muted.
Just a sec.
There we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we
All right.
can.
So thank you, Sarita. So I'm going to walk through kind of our process on how we created our reunification plan using QI methodology. So we apply QI methodology to develop a family reunification plan at our tertiary care pediatric hospital, leveraging it as a common language due to its familiarity among healthcare leadership and its alignment with existing disaster planning framework. Tools such as the Plan Do, Study Act Cycle, fishbone diagrams, driver diagrams, and process maps were used to guide and structure our approach. Our objective was to create a family-based reunification plan capable of initiating the reunification process within 4 hours of a disaster event and to achieve this within 12 months. I'm going to walk through each of the QI steps we followed for this process. Next slide, please. We began this process using the American Academy of Pediatrics Family Reunification Toolkit as our primary guide. For those unfamiliar with it, the toolkit is available on the AAP website. A small interdisciplinary team, including emergency department physicians, ED nursing leadership, and emergency management, identified and engaged all key stakeholders who will be involved in the reunification process. Next, we assess the hospital to identify all necessary steps for the plan, including the pediatric safe area, the hospital family reunification center, and the designated family reunification site. Throughout each of these steps, we apply QI methodology to guide development of the reunification plan using a tabletop exercise to test the process. As I walk through each of these steps, I'm going to reference diagrams we included in our published paper, which is cited at the end of this presentation. So integrating the QI methodology into our disaster planning helped engage hospital leaderships and clinical staff. Well, those, because they're not usually experienced in the disaster management, but are familiar with QI principles. The QI Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, as seen here, closely aligns with the Homeland Security's Exercise Evaluation Program, which is a standard framework used for disaster exercise planning outside the hospital setting. Next slide, please. We began by developing a fishbone diagram, which is a QA tool commonly used in identifying root causes or contributing factors related to a specific problem or desired outcome. So using the AAP Reunification Toolkit as our reference, we adapted this approach to outline the fundamental resources required for family reunification at our medical center. We organized these using the disaster management categories, which are the staff, space, stuff, and systems, to address what necessary resources we needed to meet each aim. Each category included more specific planning details. For example, under stuff, we identified essential items such as chargers, computers, and food. Under staff, all stakeholders were identified and grouped into categories based on their roles. Under space, we identified all needed spaces, such as the child safe area, the family reunification area, and family reunification site. Next slide, please. Here is a key driver diagram, which is a QI tool used to visualize the relationship between the overall aim of a project and change ideas that contribute to achieving that aim. So in this structure, primary drivers represented broad areas that directly influence the aim, while secondary drivers provided more detailed factors that impact the primary drivers. These are followed by targeted interventions designed to address the secondary drivers. We again applied the emergency management framework of space, stuff, staff, and systems as our primary drivers. Secondary drivers included elements such as education, internal stakeholders, the nature of the event or the disaster, safety and security, external agencies and plans, and the notification system to trigger the activation of our reunification plan. Our intervention strategies were identified by multidisciplinary meetings, sharing of the plans internally and externally, creating a process map, and finally testing our process. Next slide, please. So process mapping, as seen here, is a technique that visually outlines specific steps within a process, which helps uncover the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and complexities in our workflow. For our family reunification plan, the process maps was created again based on the AAP toolkit recommended areas, combined with input from the internal hospital stakeholders about the current reunification process. We addressed two key challenges by developing two separate process maps. One followed the unidentified minor, and the other followed the family members searching for the missing minor. This particular map traces the journey of the unaccompanied minor, illustrating several concurrent steps that occur alongside the overall workflow. It starts when the unaccompanied minor arrives, the registration as a DOE patient into the MCI disaster narrator that would be activated at our hospital if a large-scale reunification were to take place. At the same time, social work begins their identification process. The process map outlines what happens to a patient that is undergoing medical treatment, is medically cleared, and is ready for reunification during each of these steps. Next slide, please. So while many children are able to self-identify, there is a group who can't, which complicates reunification and may cause delays in the process. To support this, important information such as a child's name, date of birth, parent or caregiver's details, phone number, addresses, or any unique features of the child should be collected during interview. To organize this data, we developed a reunification section within our electronic health record system, which would be activated during a mass casualty incident. Questions included were adapted again from the AAP Reunification Toolkit. It's free text with no hard stops. Anyone that has access to EPIC that is present for the reunification or MCI event can enter data such as the ED physicians, nursing, or social work. Early involvement in social work along with the documentation of photos and identifying marks were crucial in our plan, and photos were able to be uploaded into our EMR using EPIC Rover or Haiku. Next slide, please. This process map follows the other side, so it's the family member seeking reunification for their missing minor. So previous events have demonstrated that caregivers will present to EDs looking for children and that it could further overwhelm staff at hospitals. Many hospital disaster plans assume 8 to 10 family members will be present to a hospital looking for their loved one. Call volumes and space were an important consideration in planning, as well as if if the caregiver was actually present on site or if they were calling the hospital looking for information. Next slide, please. So we evaluated our reunification plan through a tabletop exercise. The scenario that we had presented at our tabletop was a kindergarten class of about 30 students and teachers in a field trip at a large zoo or park where an explosive device overturns the bus. So EMS responds to the scene and begins transporting children to the nearest hospital. During the tabletop, we emphasized the assumptions and operational aspects of our plan. The spaces designated for reunification and communication with external partners. All stakeholders outlined their role in this scenario and explained their department's approach to reunification, including plans for staff increases, designated reunification areas, required equipment, patient tracking methods, media management, crowd control, and collaboration with school officials. Following the exercise, we applied the PDSA cycle to further improve our plan based on any gaps that were identified. Going forward, the plan continues to be refined through full-scale disaster drills. Next slide. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions. And this is the citation for the paper if anyone's interested in more details.
Please feel free to come off mute if you have a question, or you can put your questions in the chat.
Michelle, I have a question. Do you have a way to do this on the parent side of it that they can put in patient information through Epic or MyChart?
Yeah, we also talked about, we created a form that the parents can provide with information about their child, like any birthmarks, what they were last wearing, that would be collected at registration.
That one a paper one, or have you been able to integrate that into EMR as well?
We started with a paper one, and then we talked about when they register, because they would register in our patient tracking system. How do we upload that? So that's a work in progress.
So I think that's quite fascinating that you have it built into Epic, and if you have the capabilities for both of them, let the computer do the work for you to some degree and at least decrease your matches.
It would be amazing if they could match them, yeah.
Especially because they'll have photos of the child as well. You talked about media management, the one where the parents are, looking for the child. Did you guys create templates for phone messages? Because I would just imagine it would be chaotic. Whether like templates created during this exercise?
We decided that there would be like a script that would be said either in a recording or during our scheduled updates to parents at the reunification site while they waited for their for any information on their child. And media was in a very different location, so they couldn't interact with any of the families.
So any lessons learned from this, Michelle? Any gaps that you?
I think there's always room for improvement. I think going through it in real time is definitely going to show you where the gaps are. And I think just having a plan for every scenario, even if it happens or not, is key.
Absolutely. Thank you. Marie Lozon just wrote in the chat, Asper's Region 5 for kids. COE was deeply impacted by one of our hubs being at the site of the shooting in Minnesota. Yeah. Colleagues in RFK, yeah, were discussing deeply this past weekend. Yes. Absolutely. Sarita touched on that. Oh, yeah. She says scripts for frontline registrars, nurses, etc. is useful because these front door staff can be in the middle of some very distressed families. Yeah. Also for just-in-time training sheets too, because you mentioned education when you were discussing, I think the second chart you showed, you had education there. And do you have like just-in-time education sheets as well for the staff? Because I would imagine in the ED or in the hospital, there's, sometimes there's a high turnover.
Yeah, we have a lot of turnover, and I think it's just a lot of we'll probably have to make just-in-time training sheets, but just having participants in tabletops and the exercises we like the full-scale ones will involve everybody.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you. Absolutely, Marie. Yeah, she said they're often worried about HIPAA and not following policy, right? Yeah, because you have people coming up to you, they're distressed, asking you questions. Yeah. Somebody said, can you share the flow charts slide again? This one.
Michelle, do you want to go over this a little bit more, or just you know, how
Yeah.
you guys thought about it?
Sure. So
Right.
this slide here, so this is when a family member is presenting to the hospital for their missing child. So the first question we asked, well, are they calling in or are they on site? So if they called in, we had decided at that time all our calls would be routed to our Center for Families, which is a hospital center, which is really meant for families. It has bathrooms, it has laundry. It's just meant to hold a lot of family members at a time. They were given that form I had talked about to collect information about the child. And then they registered the caregiver into our visitor management system, which is just a system that anytime someone visits the hospital, they get a name tab basically. If they were verified and the child was at our facility, they were moved over to our Center for Families. That was where they were directed to wait for their child. A lot of times there might be different hospitals and maybe the child is not at our hospital, but is at the one, 5 miles away. So social work starts coordinating with regional coordination to locate where this child is. If they are in our family, once the parent is in our family for centers waiting, the next step is, well, where is their child in our system? So are they currently in the emergency room? If they are in our emergency room and the match has been made, the parent goes to the ED. If they are completed emergency care, the child had been moved to our child safe area, and then from there would be moved to the reunification site, and the family member would meet them at the reunification site.
Perfect. And as we said in the chat, the paper is cited in our Padlet, so you could get more information.
Thank you, Michelle. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. All right, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Maureen Lucci, who we fondly refer to as Mo. Dr. Lucci is a pediatric emergency medicine physician at Children's Wisconsin Medical College of Wisconsin. She's a lead physician for disaster preparedness within the hospital system. She leads the development and dissemination for reunification efforts within the Pediatric Disaster Centers of Excellence, particularly Region 5 for kids. She's collaborated with some of the leading experts on family reunification, as well as referenced on many of the major publications on family reunification. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Lucci. Welcome, Mo.
Thank you, Regina. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to apologize ahead of time, guys. I'm losing my voice. And so I'm just going to keep having like frequent drinks of water so that I don't have coughing hacks. But whatever, it's viral season, I guess. It started. We're in September. So I'm just going to start it off. I'm going to be talking about, this is actually quite fascinating because the way that Michelle presented hers is everything I love about it on EMR and the way that I think pediatric or family reunifications should happen. I've just seen so many times where it's failed EMR during a disaster. And so everything you're going to see here is like on the opposite side of it. When plan A and B fail, here's plan C, and here's all the things that we have in place when we get to that point. But ideally, I would love it. I think the Epic, using Epic to put in all the information is awesome. And I hope we get a lot of traction on that with what they've done. Next slide, please. And we can go to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a very basic statement that I almost feel like I don't need to say it out loud, but I think it still needs to be said out loud. Family reunification is such an important part of disaster medicine. And still this happens now, but up until recently, it's an afterthought that happens with a lot of the planning processes. And I think things are changing now, but you really need to have this in place before a disaster happens. I was really happy to see anyone who's a part of the Radiation Injury Treatment Network. They do their annual disaster tabletop, and this year's focus was on reunification. And to see that, like from their angle, I thought was so fascinating to say, oh my gosh, people are hearing this. They know this is important. So that's just my very optimistic view that I think we're really gaining a lot of traction with reunification. In order to do this, though, and you're going to hear this all the time, all of this stuff has to be done prior to the disaster. There's a lot of pieces with reunification, and especially with this registration, intake, and tracking, that you need to have the pieces in place before. You can, in a pinch, you can pull together people to like deal with the disaster and some of the after stuff, but to reunify them, if you don't have some of the paperwork ready to go, I don't know how you can really do that. So please take some time to make sure that your hospitals have some of this in place to make it easier. Okay, next slide. So these are the 4 areas we're going to talk about. And in all honesty, we will not be talking too much on definitive identification because I think it's very system dependent, but we will touch upon it at the very end. Next slide. So the first thing I'm going to start with is when we're talking about registration is going to be this very like basic, which way do we go? Are we doing EMR or are we doing paper charting with this? And you guys all know these, but when you have a large scale disaster, there's a lot of reasons your EMR can go down. You can have electricity failure, loss of your internet, EMR overload. You might have a cyber attack, but you may lose those systems. And so I think a good part of this is going to be, what do we do when we lose that and we can't have everything built into EMR? I think the second one, and Michelle brought this up on hers too, is you do need to have regular training when you're doing with your EMR system. And so a lot of things like Epic Disaster, they are a little bit different of a playground than what your normal Epic is. And so if you're going to use that, make sure you're training on that. Make sure your staff, when you're doing your drills, are popping it into disaster mode. And I say all this from experience of it not working, where we've tried to do disaster mode and we go, oh my gosh, I don't have the buttons. I don't have the order that I need. I can't get this patient to the next phase of care. And we had to turn it off, and it just led to more barriers for us. I think there's really great things there. I don't want to dissuade people from doing it, but make sure you know how to do it and your staff really knows how to do it too. And as Regina had brought up earlier, there's so much turnover, especially in the emergency department. So you have to make sure that's continued education every few months as you have new onboarding. But if everything fails, what do? You have to go to paper charting with this. And so I think it's important to always have this on hand. We specifically have like a disaster, it's like an old airway cart that gets wheeled in whenever something happens. And it's just got in the different cabinets, you've got all your forms, of medical chart forms, patient intake forms, you've got your triage tags, everything's built into it. So it's easy to grab. And we have everything right there for us to kind of feed us that information, because you're not thinking very well with this. It's a lot of chaos. Next slide. The second part about this registration that I think is really important to have some forethought on is your contact point. So if there's a large event that happens, people are going to be coming in to the hospital from different doorways, different entrances, and you need to really kind of shut it down for safety of patients, for safety of your providers, and really to keep yourselves organized. And if you can get it down to just one point of entry, that is ideal. That's hard to do depending on hospital systems, how many entry points you have. When we have ours, we like to keep it to the front door of the emergency department and the ambulance bay. So we still have 2 separate entrances, but those are the only 2 ways that you can get through the hospital during a disaster. And therefore, registration is set up at both those entrances, and you're capturing every single person that comes in and at least get them started into the system with it. This is the time, is at that initial contact point to really start getting your identifying information. So simple things like what clothes is that person wearing? Who are they with? Which EMS rig brought them in? Which location were they found? Anyone within your medical staff should be able, and I like how Michelle said this, it could be anyone, can put this information in there. Just start getting the information. The more you have, to some degree, is the best, because you can really build off of that. And so making sure it's easy and it's in front of the people who are tracking these patients and getting them registered so that we can get that in there. The last one, and this one also happened from personal experiences, if you go into a disaster pseudonym for your patients, also you really need to drill that one and exercise that. We noticed when we had a large scale incident that we had all these patients, we tried to go from their disaster names back to their original names. That also presents issues, because especially in these where it's major trauma, a lot of kids are going to the OR, going to the ICU, and depending on when you flip them in your EMR system, it can also cause issues with the information getting sent through. So just it's a silly thing that like we don't think about, but when it occurred, it really caused an issue, and we weren't able to really get everyone switched over from disaster names. Next slide, please. So intake. Michelle touched on this as well. If you can get a photo of a patient, that is going to give you much more than any writing can do for you. Use your EMR system, use Haiku, use Rover, but also invest in a Polaroid camera. Have one, so again, if everything goes down, they're actually pretty cheap at this point. Have a bunch of rolls of film, take a picture of a kid, and staple that to their medical chart or their patient intake form, and make sure that goes with them. But having something because that gives you more than just their face, that gives you their clothes with them, that gives you their surroundings with them. And so that's really helpful to get a picture if you can. Next slide. Intake information. So this one, Michelle had a really great slide on this too. It's a lot of the same information. And if you're going to figure out what do I need on my intake form, know that there's plenty of options out there to look for. Intake forms are used to gather that descriptive information about the person. We then can take that and put it into groupings, and it can help decrease the number of matches that you really have to do with this. So it's important to kind of get the information and then group it up to make it easier. There are plenty of people, I think, on this call who are part of this paper, but there was definitely a paper that came out that showed there's very certain components that can really help you group it and make reunification easiest to accomplish. And that includes your age, your gender, your race, and your eye color. And so having those will help you decrease it so you can get to a point of really matching up your patients. Next slide, please. This is a bunch of information that I put in some of the time to kind of look through all the intake forms that you can find on the internet. And this was just a small chunk of what's out there. But it all really comes down to a lot of the same information. And if you go to the next slide, actually, I have it all on a pre-done template form. So anyone can download this, because I don't want you starting from scratch. I want you to say, here's a lot of the stuff that people like to have on there, and then change this up. This doesn't need to be perfect. You just need something. And then what you realize is when you practice it and drill something, or when you have a real life event, you go, you know what? I needed a good chunk of space to have this information on there, to write this down. And then you mold it to fit the needs of your system. But just start with something and know that it's going to keep evolving. Next slide, please. These are just a bunch more of really well done ones that I've seen as we've searched through stuff. All of these should have a link that will bring you right to their template, but these are all different intake forms that you as the medical system can use, and this is what you start writing down on that patient when they're coming in to start getting that identifying information. This is separate from what the parents are going to do. So it gets a little bit complicated. You have your medical chart for what's going on for the patient's care. You have the intake form for the child, and then the parents would have a separate one so you can match that up. But there's plenty out there. Just get one that you like, that looks good, and start with that so you can start getting the information in. Next slide. All right, so on the other side of this, I have an example of the what the family members would put on the form for their child, and they can start putting in the information that matches up. Here's my kid's name. Here's their eye color. Here's their hair color. This is the outfit they were wearing. This is their favorite stuffy, so that you can kind of gather the information from the family, and they can start getting stuff written down there, so we can start working on those matches. Next slide, please. So when we go from kind of that registration and intake, you then move on a little bit to tracking. I'm keeping tracking really just within the confines of the hospital system, but I think you need to appreciate that tracking really starts in the field, and tracking is going to continue past their hospital care for some of these kids if it's a large scale event. And so the more that we can collaborate with all the critical points before and after the hospital system, the better it's going to be for the patient and the system, but we're just not always there yet. So I have to keep it within the confines of the hospital for this. Easy ways that a hospital system can use to track a child there. Wristband, having some kind of wristband, and I know we have plenty of different colors, so have one that's very specific for this, that says this is an unaccompanied child. We have a large scale disaster, and we need to make sure that if you see a kid wandering here with this wristband, they don't have a guardian with them. They don't have an adult. Make sure to kind of get them back to where they need to be. It's just an easy way, a visual for us, staff of the hospital, to know who needs some extra care. Using a patient ambassador. If you guys have the capacity to do this, this has been a huge win for our hospital, is to have every patient that comes in will have a staff member of the hospital assigned to them, and they will stay with them throughout their care until that parent or guardian is matched up with them again. This is helpful in many ways. It gives a familiar face to some degree for this child to say, I'm here with you. I'm going to be taking care of you. I'm advocating for you. That also is going to give them, as the child moves through the medical system without having that parent, there's an adult there who's at least listening in, hearing, understanding what's going on through the course of it, and they can relay that to a guardian once they get there. And it's some of the stuff that you just may not have in that medical chart to allow them as they do that handoff. A third way to do this is use your EMR system. I think a lot of them are built up that it's easy to follow them within your hospital, but really thinking beyond that, how can we get it that we're using Juvare or using Epic to know what's happening pre-hospital care, where they're coming from, EMS, what they did, and then post. If they're going to, your pediatric safe area, or if they're going into the care of your child protective services, can we extend beyond the hospital to make sure we're still tracking that child? And then the fourth one is making sure that paper chart, if you're using that, that's continuing with the child throughout. And we tack that onto the patient ambassadors to make sure that they're the ones keeping that medical chart with them, so we don't lose that. Next slide, please. All right, so last, I'm just going to briefly talk about definitive identification. A lot of hospitals, you have a policy somewhere. It tells you about your identification, or how to confirm identification. A lot of those, you were thinking about this one single child who needs to be re-identified with a family. This may change depending on the degree of the event. So if you have a large scale event, maybe it's a large apartment structure that's caught on fire, that the families don't have any identification, any paperwork about the child. Maybe they don't have their phones, they have no photos. All the stuff that you might use in a regular day-to-day may not be achievable in this kind of setting. So just understanding that there is going to be a spectrum on how to do that identification depending on the circumstances. Next slide. I think one of the most important parts, and this should be at the very beginning when a disaster happens, it can take hours and as long as days to ensure to reunify a child back to their parent. I think this is one of the hardest things for a parent to hear. And as a parent, I can only imagine saying it may be 24 hours, 48 hours until you are placed back with your child. But that's really how long it may take in order to do this in a safe way and to make sure you're putting the right child with the right parent. I think we've all heard stories of when this has gone wrong, and that can be extremely detrimental to the families, the patients, to us when that happens. And so I think we need to make sure families are aware this is not going to be just a couple hours before you are put back, your child's put back with you. It does take a long time to do this. If that child cannot be reunified, the hospital needs to have a plan to keep them within their hospital system, that pediatric safe area where they are medically cleared, but you are still in charge of that child until you can really hand that off to the state, and making sure you have all the supplies and staff for that. And then from there, the child will go. If you still cannot reunify them at that point, they would then go on to your family services or whatever the name for your state that you have for child services at that time. Next slide. These are just some of the resources that I've used. There's some really good stuff already out there. Again, do not make this stuff up. There's plenty out there to use. And I think we've gotten much better at really taking these resources and bunching them up into areas that are easier to find than it used to be. So know that there's plenty out there that we can help you if you're kind of at a point of saying, I don't even know where to start with this. Next slide. I think that's everything. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mo. Do we have any questions for Dr. Lucci? You can put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. If you have any questions, come off mute.
Mo, I think that was a great presentation. I think one of the things that you emphasize, there are a couple of things I think that you emphasize is one is the transparency and really the wait, because the parents are going to be very impatient. And so if you're upfront to say, please give us time as we sort this through, but also your child may not be there. And so just to have that expectation that even though you've come to our hospital, we're going to try to help you, but your child may not be here, is something that they should know. The other thing that's interesting, we've done studies, we've put like eye color, hair color, skin color. I would just say that parents are notoriously bad at that. And then Rachel Charney actually did a study on that to say, we are so bad at that. Like we just, there's different shades of like black hair, brown hair, your eyes. We won't say which gender is worse than the other because they're probably equally bad, but so I would probably move away from those type of descriptors. And then if you just have like approximate age, gender, if they have an animal or not, that may slice your database enough that you can start making matches. So think about like the key question, like a few key questions that you want to ask. The more the better. The other thing that we will think about is one hospital did this is they actually in their like policy, they take a picture of who they're releasing that child to and keep that in the medical record. And I thought that was a really clever idea of in case, hopefully not, but in case if there was any kind of like snafu or the wrong parent or there was legal issues, at least you have a picture of that child with who you discharged them with.
I think that's a great idea. I never heard of doing that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's because we document, but we don't really take a picture of like who the child is discharged with. Yeah. An ID. You're taking the child to.
Yeah, Nikki, you've had some experience transporting children all through Florida. Did you want to comment on?
No, I think this is where we're actually awful, and that's why I'm sitting on this. Because I mean, yes, we can repatriate the NICU, but to do a mass reunification, we're still working on ours on paper. But this has been a topic of conversation of, correct, who are you discharging them to, and yes, taking a picture of either the ID or the patient or the parent or caregiver themselves to really to say yes, this is who I sent them with. That was just kind of my additional comment.
I'm interested to know, a lot of us use Epic, and I don't know if anyone here uses another system, but I'm interested to know if anyone here uses a different EMR, how they do their tracking. Or they, they input the patients and they register them in their system for reunification. I don't know if anyone, if we're all Epic, that's fine. I was just wondering.
I think Children's Minnesota is still Cerner,
Okay.
right? And I think they're about to switch over, but that would be a fascinating one because they're right. I have no
Yeah, I
idea.
know there's not yet. Yeah.
Does Epic have something already built, like a standardized form? This is Michelle from Rainbow.
They do.
Okay.
Well, they have a disaster, like you can go into disaster mode.
They have the mode, the
Michelle
playground, but there is a
had
form.
made that though, right? The reunification.
Yeah,
one.
our Epic did not have a reunification form, and my current hospital also does not have a current one, so we're building it.
Yeah, so there's already one, from what I understand, there's already one that's like built that you can request and you can kind of like tailor it to how you want it to be. But there is, because that's something that we asked about. We just switched to Epic at my hospital like a year or two ago. So we're pretty new to Epic, but I know they already have one and then they can tailor it. I'm just checking the chat here. It's in the system. Okay. I like the idea of the you talked about the patient ambassador. So this is like a staff member who accompanies this child, but that would not be feasible in a mass scale event. So this would just be like a one-on-one situation, like a one-off situation where
We've only used it in mass scale events, actually.
really, okay,
Yes. So
and
we'll,
one-on-one.
and we use our family services takes the lead on that. So it's a combination of, it can be child life. I think our interpreters are a part of family services. Yep, social work. Thank you, Marie. I'm trying to think who else. And even we have like hospital ambassadors too, who can get put into that. So they've all been background checked because they're, children's employees. And so they are used, and they may stop once you get to the inpatient care, depending on how much is needed. But you start in the ED, and if you don't have someone, you have that ambassador come in with you, and they will go with them until you kind of get that patient to a stable spot.
Okay. That's great. Wonderful.
Now, if you have 100 patients, maybe that's a little bit harder. Ours was on like a scale of about 20 patients, where it was overwhelming, but not bad.
Yeah. My last question, and I'll be quiet. My big sticking point with reunification, of course, for me, it's the pre-hospital side. How do we successfully, and there may be some people here who have had luck with this, how do we successfully track these kids from the pre-hospital, from the pre-hospital arena to the hospital? I know there are some systems where EMS can take a photo of the child, input it into the system, it automatically goes into the EMR. So when that child is in the hospital, everything is linked. And that's absolutely wonderful and beautiful. But I just kind of wanted to know here, like, what people are doing on the pre-hospital side, going into, because that's always, we have EM-Track, we have Javari, but it hasn't been successful. That's something we're constantly working on to try to fix. I know Nico was in the chat. Yeah, Nikki was here. Anyone?
I can add into it really quick,
Yeah,
Regina.
Nikki,
I
yeah.
know I put in there about Pulsera. So we're actually doing a massive drill in December here in the region with our airport and our trauma center and that. And we've already done some pre-drills with Pulsera to have the, and I don't work for Pulsera. I don't get paid by them. But it is, I think it'll work. And I know Travis is on here and he said he's seen another thing, but we have tested it pre-drill so that we can see that all the players can see it, right? So they tag the patient, they scan the patient, they upload pictures. If it's an unknown, it'll say unknown. And then it's tracked to the hospital. Once it gets to the hospital, it's deemed as admitted to that hospital. And then if you have major hospitals in your agency or in your region, all those hospitals and their EOCs actually have a platform where they could see all of those hospitals to see what patients went where. And if they're listed as an unknown, the hospital has the opportunity then to update the name and whatever. So if you have a major, if you're talking about a major reunification center off-site, too, right? You've got to almost think bigger. You've got to have your internal plan, but then that external plan of what's that going to look like if you have a big offsite reunification. This speaks to all of that and kind of builds that bridge so that everybody's on one platform, and they're using ReadyOp with it as well. But so the drill will be amazing to see, but I've already kind of seen it work just in the pre-planning of it.
That's pretty robust. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think
Wow.
Hannah also had some comments in the chat.
Yeah.
Hannah, do you want to come off mute?
Hey, yeah, thanks. It sounds really similar to Pulsera. I'm not sure why our EMS agencies went away from Pulsera to ReadyUp. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but we've been able to drill it a couple times, and we recently actually did it with our FCC. Um, they've kind of gone away from the system they've been using. And yeah, similar to what Nikki shared, it uses EMS can send hospitals a link. So within our 2 trauma centers in Boise, Idaho, we can enter who we have and track, get the large view that everybody else has. So it's been good so far.
That's terrific. And Texas, I believe, uses Pulsera as well. I think they do in Texas. I think they do. We're going to use Pulsera and Exploring Merge. This is Travis. Yeah.
Yeah, Travis, do you want to come off mute just to?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I literally just went through the software intake process for Pulsera. I got approved last week. So we'll be implementing it, but I've seen it work. We've been talking to them for quite some time. Nikki's been instrumental in helping us get it started. I don't work for me, so it's just a really great product. But I happened to stumble upon a product. It is EMC Merge, MERRGE.com at the Homeland Security Conference last week. That pretty much checked every box I had for reunification. It's got facial recognition, photographic software. They'll actually merge your demographic forms for things you put in there like tattoos or identifying features, stuff like that, from the forms the parents fill out to the forms that are filled out by staff to help you kind of unify those patients. But it's really strictly dedicated to reunification. So I have a lot of hope for it. I've scheduled a demo for next week. I do encourage everybody to check it out if you have the means. I will say that the website is a little lackluster. The product is far better than what's demonstrated on the website, but it seems like a really great product.
Thank you, Travis. Okay. Anna said, ours is more rugged. All the patients get a tag. I think we talked about that. Yeah. And we put the EMS tag number into the chart. So that's how they track with the tag. Yeah.
We do similar. We're very low
Mhm.
tech right
We
now
do,
at Boston
yeah.
Children's.
Well, what Mo said is sometimes with the Epic, with the disaster playground, sometimes it can get so cumbersome and not everything is there. So we'll just say, let's do paper charting for the drill. And that's usually how it ends up happening. Yeah, a lot of times. Right. Any other questions?
Yeah, Gabriel, do you want to talk about the floods or how Texas used Pulsera? And also Donald, if you guys.
Yeah, was used in the flooding event.
Hi, this is Don. I understand it was used for helping to identify some of the victims. We don't have first knowledge. I don't have a contact for it, but that's what I've heard. And we do use it here in El Paso, but we've had struggles getting EMS to use it so far. So we're still working on that.
I will say I was in a meeting with them only because we're working on going full scale implementation down here, and they did tag over 1,700 victims. Anybody that they came across where they even actually tagged like body parts that they found, so that once they identified them, they could help kind of with that piece of it too. And so they said that anyone that moved in that area, they ended up putting a tag on whether they went to a hospital or not. And I think that's what they're planning on doing with the drill here at the airport, is anybody even who doesn't need transported, who's in the green zone at the airport, still gets a tag, just so that we understand where everybody's at the moment.
Great. All right, we can move on to reflections. Anyone else? Okay, everyone, this is where you get out your phones. Just gonna talk a little bit here about reflections, like talking about some of your key takeaways from today's session, some of the strengths and challenges, excuse me, you identified in your reunification plans, and what will you commit? We're always asking, what will you commit in reunification planning in the next month? It doesn't have to be something, huge. So if you can just take about, 3 to 5 minutes, the QR code is there, and it's a form, it's a Google form to just kind of fill out, and then we'll discuss after. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat. And Laura also has the Google form in the chat as well. You can just click on. Feel like we should be playing soft music in the background.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. 2 more minutes, then we'll get started. Great. And before we move on, I just wanted to say, Mo, I love hearing you speak, and I just wanted to thank you for that wonderful presentation. So let's talk about some key takeaways from this session. And you can come off, like we said, you can come off mute, and we can just, we can talk as a group, or you can just share. Yeah, they did do a fantastic job. Or we can just share in the chat. But I'd prefer if we came off mute and just had a discussion. So what were some key takeaways from this session for you?
I wanted to comment on the excellence of the presenters and discussants. So just again, Mo and Michelle, both great job. I love the process improvement rubric because it breaks it down for people trying to do improvements in their own systems. I think it feels so overwhelming to the social support groups in an emergency management operations group. you take this to your emergency management team and they're just like, oh, oh my God, it's so hard. But if you chunk it out in steps or
Yeah.
processes, I think that's digestible. So just Michelle,
Doable.
great job. And so I'd love to say that, we're perfect in my space. We are not. But what we are really good at is doing QI. This approach is right up the wheelhouse of the people that I work with in my center. So I'll be taking some of this driver diagrams and stuff back for discussion. I think that they will find that more palatable and digestible. And we just did a massive real exercise with the whole community, and we're having a big after action opportunity to talk about stuff like this. So it is timely. So I appreciate this. Thank you.
I think one of the key points about why Michelle's paper was written was really kind of because you can garner engagement and executive support using language that other people understand. And QI in healthcare is something that other people understand. So while we have all of our kind of reiterative processes with exercises and drills and after action reports, if you can actually start speaking the same language as some of your hospital executives and other people in the hospital realm, you can actually increase your engagement. And so I think using the QI language can be helpful to garner that support and engagement.
And Michelle, have you found that to be the case? I agree.
I think now I'm starting over kind of from scratch at a new institution, so I think it's been helpful.
Okay. Right. Moving forward, are there any strengths that you've encountered in your reunification plans thus far? Or any challenges?
I think that one of our challenges is, Don,
Go ahead, Don.
I think one of our challenges is it doesn't get exercised often, right? So I think that, it's really hard to maintain a strong family reunification plan if we don't exercise it. So one of the things that we are going to commit to is a functional exercise coming up here pretty soon, where we practice.
And it doesn't have to be like a huge exercise to start. You can have like you can start with like a small tabletop and then just kind of work your way up.
Well, that's what we want to do, a functional with just the family reunification part where we practice.
Good. Okay, perfect.
I like the idea of process map. This is Michelle from Rainbow. I like the idea of the process map because you don't do it often enough that somebody, when you do have to do it, if you pull out that process map, it's going to make you remember what steps you have to follow.
And Michelle, if I'm correct, you did this with the AAP, right? I know it was with Sarita and Rachel, but is this like something that can be accessed through the AAP?
The diagrams?
The diagrams, right.
It wasn't with the AAP, we just used the AAP Reunification Toolkit kind of as a guide about the major things we should hit. But everything is on the Padlet. All the diagrams are in the paper.
Padlet, okay. Just wondering about easy accessibility. Okay.
Marie, I think reunification is already a Joint Commission standard, though it doesn't have to be robust. So like you could just have a page that just said joint family reunification and it would pass muster. So really, I think it's great that you mentioned the Joint Commission meeting where I think we have children, hospital leaders really in the disaster space leading a talk, which is amazing. But I think it will probably need to be a little bit more detailed. So.
I'm hoping so, but there's nothing in the Joint Commission that is compelling them. They don't get a a black mark on their element of performance for not having.
Oh, Marie, you're muted.
It's not as robust, and obviously October 7th we'll be talking about those things, but it needs to be more show us your process, and it has to have these elements. It's going to be a long journey, we know that, but the journey has to start with them recognizing children's needs at Joint Commission, CMS, and DMV, all the accreditation places.
Absolutely.
And this is actually a perfect segue because Marie Lozon is going to be one of our panelists for next month. And really, I think what has been brought up many times during this collaboration is what are the legal implications or the legal aspects of it. If you would like, feel free to write your questions in the chat or send your questions to Christy Deutschman or actually Laura Aird. Beforehand, and we can try to get them to Marie's team so that they know what kind of questions did you have. As again, you can invite your risk management or your legal teams to be part of this. So please, please just let us know. I think it's been brought up with each session about the legal ramifications, and so we're excited to have Marie and her team present. Thank you, Marie.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
And if you guys have risk management or like social work or other people who might be interested in joining with your team, please invite them to register and come along for the ride. It's going to be a great, it's going to be a really great discussion.
And I think I'll add that today's session raised the bar because it was so exceptional. So Marie, you've got your marching orders and you can get your colleagues in gear, but the sessions are just getting better and better. Few reminders before we close. The Pediatric Disaster Preparedness Self-Assessment for Children's Hospital, otherwise known as PDPAC. They're getting ready to close it and take a look at the data. There are between 70 and 80 children's hospitals out of more than 200 that have submitted, but there are at least 20 children's hospitals that started but didn't finish and didn't submit. So I'm giving the last reminder to check with your institution's team leader or point of contact to see if they are in that position and see if you can't get them to move it along and submit. If you need more time, I know they will offer that, but once it's closed and you won't have access to a dashboard. So please see if you can do that. It would be very helpful. And then for the remaining sessions, whether they are focus area sessions or full collaborative sessions, we are looking for a representative for each team to tell their DRC story. You can talk about a report of a response to a real world event. You can discuss outcomes from a drill, or you can describe what your journey has been throughout the collaborative and your improvement progress, gaps, achievements, where you're stuck, etc. So you can let your focus area lead or point of contact know, or you can let me or Julie Shelton know, but we would really like to encourage that moving forward. Next slide. There's the request for the session evaluation. We really do read everything related to this. So I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. There's a QR code there, because if you don't have time to do it now, you can finish it later. Same thing with applying for CE or the other aspects. You have 60 days. So if there's a desire, you have the time. Sarita or speakers, did you want to add any final words?
No, just thank you so much. Really, we're trying to build this collaboration around your needs. And so that's why the session evaluations are so important. In fact, that's how the legal aspects kept coming up in the session evaluations. And so that's why we modified our schedule. So really, it's whatever you want these to be, and how you want these to be. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to Regina, who was an amazing moderator for this session.
No, I just wanted to say, thank you for joining us and echo what Sarita was saying. We are here for you. So please reach out with any questions.